All right. Hey, Sean Jantz here and Megan Jantz, my wife. Hey,
Hello.
today we are talking about one of our favorite people, Mel Robbins. So if you're not on Mel Robbins yet, don't know who she is, you need to get on her now. You need to be following her on Instagram, on YouTube. She's definitely one of our favorite people. And so one of our favorite motivational speakers, our favorite authors. Mel, I think one of the things we really love about Mel is kind of how real she is. When you say that about Mel,
Yeah, for sure. She is not afraid to tell you the truth. She doesn't sugarcoat things. And I think I love the most is most of her book that I just read, I read it on Audible and it's her that's reading it. And she is so funny and she's such a good storyteller. Yeah, anyway, I just love that she's so real.
and I think like in real, we also use the term relatable. And
Mhm.
so that's something I coach a lot of people who are creators who are trying to be seen online is like watch Mel Robbins to gain more relatabilityness. I guess if that's a word.
Yeah, and I think how she tells stories.
Yeah, she actually really gets. She gets you. And that's actually a skill.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
Very
obviously
trained.
something she's learned. She was actually one of her first jobs. She did like a radio. She told stories on radio. I think that's what she did. And
She's a radio
she had
personality.
her own TV show. So there's so much you can learn from just following Mel Robbins, watching her videos. She has like a 26 million views on one of her first ever TED Talks because her first book that she released was called the 5 second rule. Basically, what it was, you want to sum up what that 5 second rule is because I know that you use it a lot, right?
Yeah, I do. I've started using it, but it's basically before like you have to do something hard that you don't want to do. You just count backwards and so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, and do it. Whether that's getting out of bed, whether that's making that phone call you don't want to make, having that hard conversation.
So how she describes it is it's basically a pattern interrupt. Is you use the right, our brains are constantly, especially our subconscious brains, like pick up your phone or I don't want to get out of bed, right? That's what's constantly happening. But when you just do a quick 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? And that was a huge and she did a lot of studies of why it works, but it's a pattern interrupt in your brain that helps you do something hard, right? I basically it's like um helps you helps you get that courage or be bolder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was her first book, The 5 Second Rule. About a month ago, she came out with her second book called The High Five Habit, which Megan just finished, and I have yet to finish it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have Megan kind of share with me some of her biggest takeaways from this book. And it's kind of silly when you first hear about it, but the gist of it is, right, literally the whole gist is that she says high five yourself every day in the mirror and that changes your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like how she describes how like your entire life you're constantly literally high-fiving other people
Mm-hmm.
and figuratively high-fiving them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big sports guy. I've been high-fiving the KU Jayhawks my entire life, the Denver Broncos, the Denver Nuggets. I played sports, constantly high-fived my teammates, right? You played sports, you were a big high-five girl. So and we're high-fiving our kids, but we almost never high-five ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just, I like what I love the most too is she's so real about like just the stories of how she came up with stuff and she will tell you like the worst of the worst, like what she was going through in her life, which is not good. And then it just, yeah, she comes
And it
up with this
wasn't
stuff.
that long ago that she started high-fiving herself, right?
Yeah, no, it was like in the middle of the pandemic. And so I just love that story of her. She's basically, I mean, you guys got to read the book and hear the story. She's obviously a way better storyteller. But yeah, she was just at a low point in her life and, got up in the morning. And how many of us go look in the bathroom mirror and we just like pick apart ourselves?
Like how she tells her story, right? Like I got one boob hanging lower than the other
She's got
one.
dark
Like,
circles under her eyes, or
that's why
looking
she's
at her
so
loose skin.
relatable, right?
Yeah, she really is. And she just like paints this picture. It's so funny. But anyway, and then she needed to get on this Zoom call in like 15 minutes and she wasn't ready. She hadn't even walked the dog or like had her coffee or anything. And she just kind of reaches up, gives herself a high five, and just kind of immediately felt better. And then this kind of just started this habit where she did it the next day and the next day and the next day. And she just kind of felt like she was showing up to see a friend. And basically her books start off where it's like it's just this simple habit that's going to take control of your life but also it's kind of a way to like celebrate you. Like you brought up the sports things, like you're giving everyone else high fives, but when was the last time you gave yourself a high five and cheered for yourself? And, really like how you deal with yourself is the foundation of every relationship in your life, which I can really relate to that. And one of the things that I love about it is seems kind of silly, like it seems really dumb actually.
It's super, especially for someone like me. You know me.
Right. I know. Can you see Sean going up and giving himself a high
Like
five
it
in the
is, and
mirror?
and I would say this is definitely kind of a woman habit for sure, right? And so men, I
Yeah.
think, are like high-fiving myself. I don't need to high-five myself, right? But I have been finding myself doing it,
Yeah, me too.
right?
Mhm.
And I really like the example of kind of like you literally have two different people on your shoulder, right? You
Mhm.
kind of have the person who knows what you should be doing. You
Mhm.
have that person, but then you also have that person that's like you're non. I guess you could say you have a disciplined person inside of you, and
Mhm.
you have a non-disciplined person inside of you,
Yeah, for sure.
and you're high-fiving. Like it's almost like there is two people looking yourself in the mirror, right? So it's
Mhm.
almost how I've been doing it, because I have been I high-fived myself at the gym the other day. There's no one in there, so I was, you got everything pumping, and I just freaking gave myself a high
Yeah,
five.
no,
And I
I
actually
did it
felt
too.
pretty
Put on a
good
workout.
about it, right? Because I didn't want to get up that morning, but I did. I
Mhm.
was pumped, high-fived myself, and I felt it did. I felt different.
Mhm.
Meaning like I was high-fiving like that the disciplined person inside of me saying,
Mhm.
dude, freaking good job, dude. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, for
And
sure. And what I love too is like she's very much like a research person actually, and like
she
science
says that
person.
very specifically.
Yeah.
Everything she says, like, I do research and studies, right?
Yeah, she's like, because I know it sounds stupid, but
Hokey.
trust me, there's so much research behind it. And so she starts off kind of just sharing this research, and one of them was like there was 3 groups of kids, and they were all given difficult tasks. And so one of the groups, they were all struggling. So one group, they kind of gave them some praise, so saying like, you're so smart, you're so talented, good job. And then the next group, they praised them by praising their effort, like, oh, you're working so hard, keep it up, you're very dedicated. And then the third group, they just simply gave a high five. They didn't say anything, but they high fived them all. And so come to find out, high five, that group did the best by far. And then also there's one, and I think the gist is just like shared celebration, like it just gave those kids like the boost they needed, like when you make that physical contact, you just share your energy. And yeah, they outperformed them for sure. And then the other one is another study that I thought was amazing, which we can relate to with sports backgrounds. And I thought of, oh my gosh, I need to share this with my volleyball coach, for example. But do you want to share that one?
So
Kinda who this was?
they did a study. It was at UC Berkeley. They did it so those NBA players, and they found in the preseason and in the beginning of the season, they found they could predict which teams were going to make the playoffs or likely even win the championship by which team was high-fiving the most during the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought and she kind of explains why that's so important, right? Is kind of like it just shows giving high fives creates massive team camaraderie. And even when you watch NBA players, they're, I've always kind of wondered, why are they constantly high fiving?
Well, it's not, and even like fist bumps, chest bumps, like I think it's just kind of like a physical, like attaboy.
Yeah, which I'm sure by now every NBA team knows now. Hey, the team that high fives the most is going to win, but I can see why that is for sure. Now that I've played not pro, I've played college sports, high school sports. I can definitely see why the high fiving, which team high fives the most, probably is going to make the playoffs or go to the championship.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's just a matter of like they say it like shares trust, boosts your mood, communicates confidence, and reminds you that you can still win.
And she even mentions like physical touch, right?
Uh-huh.
And so what were some, she kind of goes on, she starts kind of giving some of these studies of why high-fiving. And I've also, before we move on with the kids, we've been getting our children to high-five themselves in the mirror. So I think that's a really good trait to start teaching your kids to high-five themselves.
And I give them more high fives.
Yeah, and I've been finding myself giving our kids way more high fives too. So what are some other takeaways? So she kind of goes through the studies of why. Because you think about it, an entire book of like, hey, high five yourself. No, obviously there's 250 pages. So clearly she's
yeah, there's just like a lot of, well, one thing I love is like the stories. Like I said, she's a master storyteller, so there's so many good stories in there too. But one of the things that I could really relate to was, I've heard some people have said, oh, I love high five, high five's great, but I hate mirrors. And so a lot of people have this which I agree. I think women, studies show that like 91% of women dislike something about their bodies, or how they look. And so a lot of times I think when
who's the other 9%? They're lying.
Right, probably. but a lot of times I feel like we go in the mirror and we kind of like pick apart ourselves at like, oh, well, should have put on more makeup, or oh geez, you're looking a little tired today, or oh, you know what I mean? Like you just kind of pick yourself apart. And it just kind of talks about like when you look in the mirror, like see constantly all these things that you need to fix, it just basically you'll never be happy that way. And so I guess that's kind of like the very short answer. But it doesn't matter like how successful or thin or like muscular you get or wealthy or whatever. Like if you don't feel good about like who you are, you'll never be happy.
And I did like how she mentioned like, she doesn't specifically say this, but it's kind of the premise that I teach people a lot is go get things that you can't buy, right? Work on things that you can't buy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
like self-esteem.
Yeah. So you can't buy self-esteem. Mm-hmm. You can't buy love. You can't, as much as someone says you can, the richest people in the world, they're all getting divorced. You've noticed that? Mm-hmm. You can't buy love. Mm-hmm. And so that is why, like, I do think that concept of just high-fiving yourself, you're starting to build some more self-esteem. And that's why I really like Mel Robbins.
Yeah.
You can clearly see she has no work done on her body, but she's still really pretty, naturally beautiful. Mm-hmm. But she's not one, you can tell she has no work. She's not having like a boob job or something like that. And like she's, but you can tell Mel really loves herself. You can definitely see this.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just she talked about this a lot. She's like, I've made the first 40 years of my life really, really hard. And I didn't have to struggle. Like now that she knows all these things. And it's kind of funny just being that like she is one of the highest booked like motivational speakers. And yet she still has like these down moments. Like has to come up with these little like habits that, help you get through your day and stuff. And so, yeah, and I think it just comes down like something as simple as a high-fiving yourself in the mirror. Again, it's just that little like a habit builder, and she talks about how transformation, like it's not overnight, there's no fast track to transformation. Like you've got to just build it.
Yeah. And it's like one high five the next day, you're not all of a sudden just going to be this confident person, right? I think she mentions, and just like we talked about last week at Atomic Habits, it's high-fiving yourself for weeks on end, right? And not forgetting to do it. And eventually it becomes such a habit it's like brushing your teeth, right? And that's why she mentions she always high-fives herself after she brushes her teeth. That's just it's habit stacking, right? You habit stack things. So something that you're already doing every day, likely in front of the mirror, finish brushing your teeth and high-five yourself. And yes, nothing's going to happen right away, right? Yep. Just like when you eat a salad for the first day of a diet, nothing happens when you eat a salad.
Right. Yeah.
But the more, and I've been finding myself, because I have been finding myself really I like high-fiving myself in the gym mirror. There's just something about that, right? It really.
Do you accomplish something?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, hey, you got up this morning. A lot of people probably didn't. Yeah. You're actually doing something.
Yeah. And what about people that haven't gotten there? That need high five.
Yeah, as long as you like just show up, right? You're up, you're looking at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, and she talks about that. Like she's heard of a lot of different ways like people have reminded themselves, like put a little Post-it note on their mirror or like outline their handprint in lipstick or something like that, and I kind of did the toothpaste thing on our mirror because that was all I had at the time, or writing themselves a note with like whiteboard marker and stuff. But the next thing I want to talk about is something that you've talked about a lot, but it's basically about the RAS, okay? The RAS, the reticular activating system. So she talks about this, about like how,
But I want to upplay this before you get into it. The RAS is the single most powerful concept for any human being looking for success or anything in their life. So I want to make sure that you're perking up right now, because the RAS is the single most important thing to understand to have more success, more happiness in your life. And why is it? Why is the RAS so important?
Well, it's basically your filter of like how you're, you know, it's basically your filter of how you see the world, and it filters what comes in and what doesn't come in. And she talks about like, hey, you need to make your RAS your best friend, and you can train your RAS to filter what's important to you. And you can train your mind to actually see things you want to see, which is the opposite of what most people do.
Yeah,
What do
and
they do?
so the RAS is big. So the RAS can be explained really simply. It's basically confirmation bias. And it's a lot of reasons why our political system in the United States is so polarized, is because the RAS only filters in what we want to see.
Mhm.
And we're not objective. We don't see the other side because our RAS isn't filtered towards that. So like when you're on Facebook and you see a post that you wholeheartedly agree with, you're going to like it and see it. But if you see stuff that you probably should see, it's actually it will actually give you different perspective on things, right?
Mhm.
But you're gonna just keep scrolling through because your RAS isn't focused on that. And so your RAS is a confirmation bias of how you see the world. And I think that's super important. And again, the greatest example would be a Republican versus a Democrat. A Republican sees the world in a complete different way than the Democrat does.
Mhm.
And the RAS in a Republican, they're only going to see all of the bad stuff about Biden, all the bad stuff that's going on with this administration, right? And they're going to only
Mhm.
see all the good stuff about potentially Trump coming back or what have you. The liberal is going to be the exact opposite. They're they're actually going to see some of the positives of what's happening with this Trump administration.
You mean Biden?
They're going to see the positives of the Biden administration, right? Because their RAS is focused on, they're not going to look and see in hyperinflation, gas prices. They're just going to, no. Oh, there we go. We got a win. See, I told you Biden's doing a good job.
Name a win.
Right?
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Right? I told you Biden's doing a good job because their RAS is trying to only find what they want to believe.
Yeah.
And so that's super important, is whatever's happening in your life, good or bad, you've programmed your brain to see that way.
Yep, exactly. And so like, starting in the mirror, like you look at yourself and you just like have all this self-doubt about like, oh, I'm not good enough, or oh, you don't look good, or you're fat, or you just can't get your life together, whatever it is. Like that's what you keep telling yourself. And so the RAS goes to work every single day to prove that you're right. And it will just filter all these things of like, oh, you were late to work that day. Oh, you forgot to go pick up your prescription. Oh, you forgot to walk the dog, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like all these negative things. That's what it picks out. And so the important thing is like your RAS is like a computer system and you can reprogram it.
Yeah. And I think that's the great example there, is that your brain literally is like a computer. And as look, these computers are actually brand new. We're constantly upgrading our computers. We're constantly upgrading. Apple releases like a software update every month. You need to start doing the same thing to your brain.
Mm-hmm.
You got to start updating your goals. You got to start updating. What do you want? What are you clear on? Like if you want this in your life, a good example, you can actually use the RAS to find a dream spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because when you're constantly having this thought of like, oh man, every guy I meet is this, or he's a narcissist. They only care about themselves. So that's why, and then you're only going to find narcissists.
Yeah,
you're only going to find guys that think about themselves, because
Mhm.
that's your brain is only going to find things that you believe. That's just how it's our confirmation bias. We want to see things that make us feel good, and we don't want to be proved wrong. Our brains don't like that,
Mhm.
right? And so I know people have used the RAS to find a spouse. You can use the RAS to build your business. You can use your RAS to find new friends,
Mhm.
things like that. You can use the RAS for anything in your life can be changed by upgrading the RAS. But quickly, because people are going to be like, okay, I need to upgrade my RAS. What would you, because I got some good ideas of how I've changed my RAS. How do you change your RAS then?
One of the biggest things that I've done is I have a business plan that I read every single day. And before I go to bed at night, like I'm really big on
And that's just simple
like
Think and Grow Rich stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And I'm just like kind of I say prayers, and I constantly think about like what's on my business plan, what I want, my affirmations. So I don't know, that's something that I've definitely put on my rest. She talks about some other things too, like, having a journal and stuff like that and writing down things that pull
Yeah.
you towards.
One way I have helped my Raz is associations.
Yeah.
So when you get fixated on an idea, what happens is you really like to associate, especially if it's a negative, bad idea, right? Something that's not serving you. What happens is you actually want to, your brain subconsciously will start surrounding yourself with people who believe the same thought as you.
Yeah.
So let's say you constantly have this thought of like building a business is so hard, right? You're actually going to
like no one wants my product.
no one wants, yeah.
Everybody says no. Like
Yeah.
if you just constantly
You're going
think
to
that no one
actually
wants to listen to
find
me.
more people who are also struggling in their business. And then you're going to be like, oh, he's struggling too. Maybe I'm right. Business is hard in 2021, right? But no, there's so many people flourishing in 2021 in business. And so I have sought them out through books, through podcasts, and I'm constantly hearing like 2021, 2022, the whole decade of 2020 is going to pop off. It don't matter who the president is, no one cares, right? Or like your business is not going to be based on who the president is.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm listening to this and I'm like, you're right. Like, 2020 is going to be a life-changing decade for most people. It'll finally be the end of the information age. It's why you see me post so much. It's why you see me doing podcast. 2020 is the year of getting out there, being a creator, because it's going to be really hard in 2030 for sure. The reason I'm saying that though is because I'm constantly surrounding myself with people who are saying that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense at all? Instead of, if someone tells me 2020 is dead, like you're out of my life.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually a big point too. She makes in the book, because actually one of her chapters is on jealousy, which, social media, you can like scroll through your social media and see. She talks about her daughter seeing somebody that's like took a year off and is living in Mexico and working in Mexico on the beach. And her daughter's like, I could never do that, and Mel's like, why can't you, like, so she says like this, something that kind of, I guess, really spoke to me was like, when you get jealous of somebody, that's actually a sign, like that's something that you want, like that's a desire that's pulling you towards it. And instead of like feeling jealous, like,
yeah, and I found how she said it. Jealousy is a navigation tool, just like curiosity or desire. So a lot of people think like jealousy is a bad thing, but it's actually a tool.
Yeah. So like Sean's saying, hey, I follow these people, right? And rather than like look at these people that are like flourishing in 2020 and like getting down on himself for like maybe not being where they are, he turns it around like they're like his inspiration.
So Ed Milet's one of our favorite people, and he's in our business. Megan's WFG business. So that's how we've known Ed for years. He just sold his podcast. I'm sure it's millions of dollars to Stitcher. I'm actually pretty jealous of that, but I'm using that as like, why am I jealous? Oh, because
that's something you want.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I really do want to, and obviously I know the show's relatively small, but I remember Ed Milet's first episode is Tony Robbins, like 3 years ago. And yes, it was Tony. It did get a lot of views, but if you go back to some of his first podcasts, there wasn't that many views. Not really.
Yeah.
You can go back, and the quality of his podcast weren't that good back then either. It'd get better and better and better and better. And he's been doing it every week for 3 years. And it just got sold. And I saw that. And I'm like, I'm kind of jealous of that. And I realized, Mel Robbins says, hey, use that as a tool. And that's why I'm going to continue to do this every week, because who knows where this could. I think podcasting like this can lead you to great things, just getting out there, even though I have a relatively small audience. Just like I tell someone, you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think rather than like you seeing that as like, oh, Ed's already doing it, like I'm too late, or it's already been done, or I'd be a copycat. Like, no, you have to flip it. Like,
no, yeah, because Stitcher is that's the first podcast they bought.
Oh,
it's just getting started. Like, absolutely not.
I've never even heard of Stitcher.
Stitcher is just a podcast.
If I'm telling you,
Sirius XM, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So on the radio. So he's now going to be seriously on the radio, Stitcher. It's going to basically, they're going to buy his podcast, and massively upgrade the quality. More than likely, the guests it's gonna be almost like a Jimmy Fallon. So when someone has something to promote, they're likely gonna go on Ed Milet's show. It's gonna be very
cool. Well, that's how I got this book, was because actually Ed Milet had Mel Robbins as a guest, and it was probably my favorite episode of that of all year, maybe ever. I don't know, but that's actually where I got this book too, was because Mel went on there and promoted her book. But I just completely fell in love with Mel, and I'm actually so glad I got the audiobook too.
Yeah, so keep going. What are some more of your takeaways?
So I think this book is definitely relatable to women. You know, she talks a little bit about guilt too. So like, I thought these were really kind of some interesting subjects, like jealousy and guilt, but like how to, again, flip them to serve you. And basically she talks about there's two different types of guilt. I think I think moms, you know, or women, I think carry a lot of guilt as far as like, you know, okay, well,
and I can see that how moms definitely have more guilt than
yeah, it's tough. Like you're a working mom, but yet you feel guilty for like being away from your kids. Somebody else is raising your kids or whatever, or you know, you're pursuing what you really want to do, but you're missing out on time with your family. But then sometimes I feel like when I'm at home too, like I feel guilty for not like busting it in my business right then and there too. And so anyways, yeah, I just feel like as women, we get pulled in a lot of different ways. But she talks about there's two different kinds. There's productive and there's destructive. And productive basically gets you to care deeply about, you know, the world around you and the place in it. So for example, like if you miss a birthday party and you're like, well, I'm so sorry, but I really want to make this up to you. Like you feel guilty. And it's kind of about like not people putting guilt on you. You put it on yourself. And I think that's something that
So you actually just said something, and I forget who was teaching this, but did you notice you caught yourself saying, I'm so sorry? Someone was teaching, like, stop saying sorry. Instead of saying, hey, thank you for understanding that I couldn't make it.
Yeah.
See, notice the huge difference between I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to, hey, thank you for understanding.
Yeah. And that's what she says on the podcast, or not on the podcast, but in the book, is like just flipping your script.
Saying thank you is how you take your power back, right? Acknowledges that you have needs. You appreciate that people see them and you help them fulfill them. So that's something that, and I know that's something definitely you could work on, because I do find yourself saying, like, you really care about.
Say it a lot.
You say, I'm sorry.
I do.
Instead of
say it
saying
a lot. Like even in text messages and stuff, I like go back. I'm like, I apologize for a lot of things.
And I would say saying I'm sorry does put you in a lower position for sure.
Yeah, and it makes you feel like bad about yourself too. And you know, rather than,
hey, I'm so sorry I'm late. Oh, hey, thank you for waiting.
Or like, sorry I didn't get that done, or sorry this took me a while, or whatever. You know, I would say that's what I apologize the most, is just yeah. But anyways, but yeah, you kind of touched on it. But really, I mean, it's kind of annoying when people apologize all the time, right? And then also like people that support you and love you, or like your clients or whatever, like it's basically giving them an affirmation of like thanking them for whatever it is, you know, rather than being sorry. It's really powerful.
So I know you mentioned something about, there's a story about Eduardo. He's a cab driver in Dallas, and it has kind of something to do with his Raz. How did that story go?
So the story about Eduardo, so she gets into a cab, and I'm not as good of a storyteller as her, but it's so good.
So notice how you just said that. So this is something like that's super important. So you just said, notice that I'm not a good storyteller. So you are programming your Raz to constantly think you're not a good storyteller.
See, I'm a student of all this
stuff. And so am I.
I like.
But so am I. I catch myself saying things like that.
But I guess it's good. Obviously, you got to apply it.
Because you just said that, you're constantly going to be thinking, I'm not a good storyteller.
Okay.
So you really got to.
Well, I'm going to tell this story.
Okay.
So she gets into a cab in Dallas, and this guy, Eduardo is his name, was like, oh my gosh, this is a dream come true. I need to talk to you. I need your help. And she's like, yeah, I'd love to help you. Okay, well, my dream is to be an actor. I want to help people in the Latino and Black community become actors. And she's like, well, what are you doing here driving a cab in Dallas? You need to go where there's acting, you know, which is either New York or LA. And he goes, I would, but I'm 25 years old. I only have $700 to my name. And she looked at that as like, awesome. Get the heck out of here. You got $700. That's going to get you there.
No kids, no responsibilities. What are you doing?
No house. Yeah. And he looked at it as like, oh my God, I only have $700. It's so expensive to live there. But he also talked about how he has a friend there too. And so she's like, go live on their couch for a little bit till you get on your feet. And so, obviously she kind of talked to him a little bit and she said, okay, well, when are you going to do this? And he's like, I don't know, in the next couple of years. And she's like, in the next couple of years, no, you need to have a deadline. That's one of the biggest thing is like, you need to have a deadline of when you're going to do this stuff. And he's like, okay, well, as soon as possible. She's like, no, not as soon as possible. Eduardo, if you really want this, like, why am I fighting for your dream more than you're fighting for this dream? If you're going to do this, you need to, it's middle of September. You need to be there by October 1st. And you got to listen to the entire story. But again, basically he's just, has this like mental block of why he can't go there. And she's trying to help him flip it around.
Just changes Raz to stop looking at obstacles, basically, right? And that's, I think, what people do. It's like, oh, it's such a long ways, and I don't know if I have enough gas. Like, you'll figure it out, right?
Yeah. And I think the main thing is like, he's scared. Like, if you think about it, you stop and think, okay, for 1 second, what's something that you really want, And one of the reasons why you're probably not there is like, you're scared.
Yeah. And so I actually look at that story, though, is how good for Mel for saying that, right? And like, I want to do that for more people. Like, that's kind of my whole goal, is to be that Mel, to hear people's dreams and then be like, what do you like, try and help them, wake them up.
It's funny you say that. Yeah. Cause that's basically how she ends it, was just like, that was 2 years ago. I really don't know if Eduardo's ever made it big or what he's ever done. But in all honesty, I was put in that cab for that story so I could share it with you guys and give you guys the tools and the inspiration to go out there and.
Right. And so like and there's this video where Mel says this a lot, where she talks about how like no one's coming. And that's one of like there's this video, it kind of starts off with like, no one's coming. Right. And it kind of means what she means by that. It's like your dream, like everything's up to you. Like you have to, like, I find myself doing this as well. A lot of people are just waiting for someone, waiting for a sign, right? When it's like, no one's coming. That's how, I think that's one of Mel's biggest message in her motivational talks, is like, no one's coming, dude. You need to go.
Yeah. Well, and that's what she's like, I bet your dream is somebody's just going to get in the back of your cab and discover you, Right. And she's like, I'm in the media space, like this is your sign right now that you need to act on this. And it's kind of like
this show, for an example. No one's going to necessarily, like, no one's coming to the show and going to sign me to Stitcher next week. Like, I got to make the show, and then I got to actually do promotion. I got to get out there. I got to get new guests on. Like, and so I think that's, some people do think that, like, I just got to keep going. Someone will discover me. It's like, you got to, like, it's 2021, almost 2022. I would say now more than ever, you got to get more aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, what you got to start taking what you want. And I've been telling myself this too, but not be like, in the world of social media, you can reach out to anyone at any time nowadays. LinkedIn, in DMs, TikTok. Like, I'm starting to learn getting ahead now. It's all about like who you know. And that's something I've really been working on. It's like, no one's coming, Sean. No one's going to just DM you. Like, you got to get out there. And
and I think we have this misconception, like people won't talk to you or tell you like what they're doing to make, like they want to help you. They want to high five you along the way.
Maybe 2 out of 10 people you DM that you deem successful are going to be rude. 2 out of 10. Maybe.
Yeah, I would agree.
Most of them are going to be like, yeah, hell yeah. Okay, I know this one person. Oh, you're in Dallas. You want to help. You want to get it. I actually know someone in Dallas who's helping people make movies. Let me give them a call. See if you can intern with them. It's just that one, you know what I mean? How that could have changed Eduardo's life if he got a little bit more proactive and been like, hey, I'm in Dallas and I really want to get into the movie industry. Do you know anyone?
For the friend that lives in LA that Mel's like, go stay on their couch, works in like a film crew or something like that. Right. And so she's like, there's your in. What are you doing?
Yeah, find ins. Yeah. And I like that from Mel. Love that. How she's just always like, she'll also look right in the camera and go, no one's coming. Right. And I just remember it so much, that line. And there's like piano in the background. And it just really, it's like Mel, no one's coming. And I just love it. It just reminds me, like, oh, you're right. I gotta go. I gotta start messaging people, finding people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure. Well, and just to kind of like the last few chapters of the book, you know, are obviously just kind of more like get your ass going, you
You
know,
can say ass.
and
What before we start wrapping up, because there's actually a really good story. Mel's had a lot of obstacles. She mentioned her first book, the launch of her first book, which actually turned into be a
Yeah,
huge
and I
success. But
think
the
that's
launch was
one
a
of my
failure.
favorite
How
parts.
did that go?
I think that's one of my favorite parts about Mel too is like she shares so many of her failures. Like, and I think that's why she's so relatable. Is I think a lot of times you look at people successful or
They're really scared to share their failures. I mean, I
Yeah.
won't lie. I mean, I haven't shared everything, but I think Mel definitely opens up.
oh my
She
gosh,
said
for
just 2
sure.
years ago she got liens off of her house.
Yeah, like
Tax liens.
they had some major financial failures.
Through the financial crisis in 08, they lost a restaurant, mass ton of debt. She just
made a lot of
openly
bad
talks
choices.
about it. Right?
Yeah, yes. And like you guys got to read this book, obviously, but then also go listen to her on Ed Milet's podcast too. I think maybe go listen to that first and then go read the book.
So how did her book launch? Her book, the 5-second rule, it was a failure in 2017.
Yeah, she basically just talks about, look, life is going to test you. Like, you just have to get over that. And when you're working to change your life, achieve a goal, whatever it is, like you're going to hit roadblocks. And something that's going to really separate the winners from the losers is how you deal with those. So her first book launch of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the 5-second rule, was a complete and utter disaster, actually. Well, what she thought was, but long story short, she self-published this book, had this whole tour lined up. Well, she goes on this tour, and the day that it launches, people go to Amazon to buy it, and it's sold out. There's like Amazon has no stock of this book, and they weren't going to get it for like several months. And she already has all these places lined up, all this tour, all these podcasts, all these shows, like where she's going. And turns out, so she kept doing all this stuff, you know, just trying to make the best of it. And it turns out that the book was available on Audible. And so it became the #1 selling Audible book in 2017. And why everyone loved it was because Mel read it, and they didn't edit it. Like, they just recorded it themselves, left in everything, and they felt like Mel was sitting next to them. And
well, so basically she emailed her list of her books now for sale on Amazon.
mm-hmm.
And Amazon did get a flurry of orders, but she says when Amazon all of a sudden gets a lot of orders, they will turn your book, they'll say out of stock so that they can catch up.
Oh.
And so people were messaging Mel saying, hey, I'm trying to buy, but it says out of stock. And Mel's like freaking out, right? And what she did is she just basically, she had all of these negative thoughts, but then she flipped it, right? And she was having a nervous breakdown, saying she's took a nosedive. But then she says, Mel, there's no way you work this hard and you will not be rewarded. You have to trust that there's something amazing happening that you can't see right now. And what happened was people were still able to buy it off of Audible, right?
Yep.
And and I always recommend, if you write a book, be the person who reads it, always.
Yeah, like I love Grant Cardone books too.
Yes, always be the person who reads your own books.
Mm-hmm.
And people loved the way, so everyone was just, they couldn't buy the actual book. So they're like, all right, screw it, I'll get the Audible version.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucker just went viral.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't read it yet, the 5-second rule, but I'm going to absolutely now that I'm done with this, because since she reads it, but she's so funny. She like will say the F-bomb in here. She kind of goes off on some more tangents that are really good, but yeah, but again, then, you know, it turned out that was like the best thing that could have happened for her because of like, yeah, all her Audible sales. And I think that really just catapulted, you know, her career and why people loved the book too. Because once they've heard it on Audible, a lot of times I want to go get the actual physical copy book too. So.
And so she says, current limiting belief, nothing ever works out for me. Flip it to something amazing is happening that I can't see right now. Keep going. Or when you smell crap, there must be a pony nearby. Or, right?
Yeah.
And so you like horses, so that probably, oh, there must be a horse. I smell crap. There must be a horse that I can go pet.
Oh,
right? And that's why Mel's, that's funny. You can't, like, that's stuff that she adds. Do you remember at all about her stress diary on Tom Bilyeu's show?
Yeah, the story about it.
Can you share that at all?
Oh God, no. I mean, you got to just hear the book. But yeah, this was kind of a claim to fame too, where she goes on this Tom Bilyeu's show,
Impact Theory. So she's going on the show to promote her book, right?
And she just gets so nervous, that's when she finds out about all this book stuff, and she's just like sweating profusely. Her face is as red as a baboon's ass.
Relatable, right? Just so relatable.
So funny.
Stress diarrhea. I mean, we've all had that.
Yeah. And so then she goes on this show, and he introduces her as like the queen of motivation. I think it's on there or something. And maybe the next page. Anyway, and then she comes out and says, motivation
the
is
master of motivation.
Yeah. So he introduces her as the master of motivation. And like some of the first things out of her mouth are like, motivation is complete garbage. And he's like, really?
Why did you say it's garbage?
Yeah, why did you say that? Because even she's like, you could even Google my name, and like in Wikipedia it says like master motivation person or something. And so anyway, she just she talks about how like at some point we all bought into this lie that like in order to change, or something's missing, like that you're going to be motivated to change. And that's not true at all, because the way our minds are wired, basically human beings are not designed to do things uncomfortable or difficult or scary. And so like you're never going to be motivated to do it.
And so she got stress diarrhea, so scared. But what ended up happening is that clip, Tom Billis shared the clip. Went super viral.
Like 20 million views.
She said 20 million views. 20 million views. And she's like, as far as I know, no one has commented on my pit stains. But because of that viral clip, I went on to do another interview and another and another and another. Right? Mm-hmm. So she was so I think the point on that, and we talked about it in my other episode about Atomic Habits, is one video can change your entire life. Mm-hmm. Even though you have stress diarrhea, calm down. We teach our kid to do waterfall, right? High five yourself in the mirror and go do it.
Yeah, for sure. And then she ends with a couple other stories that they honestly gave me chills. And so I just totally recommend this book, but it's basically because of like things that were brought into her life because of her RAS, because she's programmed her RAS, and, they were just meant to be. And so, yeah, I definitely highly recommend this book.
Yeah. And the last thing I would add is Mel talks a lot about how a lot of struggles, that's where she is today. So a lot of these failures, all of a sudden, boom, something happened out of that failure. So it's kind of reprogramming me, because I've had a couple failures lately, but I think it is reprogramming me to think, okay, I think something good's going to, I think something good will come. Like, and it's a good story, right? All your failures are your story on stage in 10 or 20 years, right? Because now all these failures that she went through, it's making her so relatable today. So all the failures you're going through, that's your story in 10 or 20 years when you're on a podcast or on stage, right?
Yeah, for sure. I would say even in my business, now that I've been doing this 9 years, trust me, I've had a lot of failures, and I've had a lot of like situations where I literally wanted to die, or just I thought was like the worst thing that could ever happen, or I was so embarrassed or whatever. And now when I tell those stories, people love them. And I think it gives them the most inspiration, kind of like what Mel has done with me, like her worst stories. Like you just have to read the book and listen to it. And that's what's made me feel like so close to her, and just have that much more respect for her too, seeing where she is now.
And so I'm really glad that you said that, because it's something we'll wrap up this. And there's something that you can learn from Mel in your own content building and your own building your business, being on camera, is you need to build that intimacy with people, that relatability-ness. I call it relevancy, intimacy. And you do that by just speaking your truth, but also sharing your struggles. People relate to that. And you'll notice how like you don't always have to be. And I think like doing hard things, right, can also help you build intimacy and relatability-ness with your followers that can help you sell your book or sell your course or sell your service. Be relatable and share your struggles with people. So hopefully that you enjoyed this. We'll be back again next week. Get the book. It's really, really good. Start following her. I don't follow too many people on Instagram. You can actually go see that, but I definitely follow Mel. I love almost all of her videos. I watch them
and she has a high five challenge too that you can go join as well.
highfivechallenge.com. Start high-fiving yourself. It's hokey, but every day, right? So you can't forget. And so I really like enjoying myself. Do it with your kids. If you were doing sports teams, start making sure everyone is high-fiving. is, again, it sounds hokey, but that
Dude,
creates
something somebody told me a long time ago was like weird, rich, normal, poor.
yeah, right? So hopefully you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, stay disciplined.